You are watching Frankly Speaking Sports, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, the other day I'm looking around and I'm saying, I need to become part of a Carolina Panthers group that stays positive even in these tough times. And I'll tell you what, boy, have I found a group, the Carolina Panthers Den. It's on Facebook and you need to join today. This is a group that stays positive, has a good time, and interacts with a lot of other different Carolina Panthers fans. If you want to have a great time and talk about your team, encourage your team in a way that is done very professionally, then become a member of the Carolina Panthers Den on Facebook. Make sure to join today. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports on this very, very busy Monday evening, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about. And in about 30 minutes, what we're going to do, we're going to slow it down a minute in about 30 minutes, and we're going to go ahead and do a replay of an unbelievable interview we did about 3 weeks ago with Josh Rawitch, of the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. We're going to have that interview, replay it in about 30 minutes. But boy, oh boy, Panther fans, Carolina fans, ACC fans, we have a lot to talk about. For those of you that are joining us right now, if you can please share this to your timeline, I would really appreciate that. And take 1 second, hit the share button. But we have a lot to talk about today. As far as the college football games over the weekend, with the Alabama beating Georgia, Michigan beating Iowa, of course, Cincinnati winning as well versus Houston. We will talk all about that tomorrow on our College Football Tuesday show with myself and Zach McKinnell. So make sure to tune in at 9 p.m. tomorrow for all the college football updates. We'll talk about the previous week's games and the upcoming championship games that'll be played. But an unbelievable show for you tonight. And if you can all please hit the share button and go ahead and share this to your timeline. We're on Facebook, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, all bunch of different things. But the big news out of Carolina, obviously this weekend, that has everybody talking, happened yesterday, right actually in between the 1 o'clock game while it was going on. Joe Brady, offensive coordinator of the Carolina Panthers, was fired. And we knew something was about to happen. But when I look at this entire situation, folks, and I look at this Panther situation with the offensive coordinator, I ask myself a couple of questions. We knew something had to give here. We knew something had to give. And, Joe Brady was obviously not the right coordinator for the Carolina Panthers. But I got a couple of questions about this, and I'm sure I'd love to hear comments in the comment section from my listeners. But when you listen to Joe Brady, he talks about how he went out of his comfort zone to hire this offensive coordinator named Joe Brady, who you all know, obviously, and how he should have never probably hired him because he wasn't familiar with him and didn't know much about him. My question to you is, what type of business, I don't care if it's football, baseball, something like restaurant business, whatever you do for a living, what type of moron is going to go out and hire someone when he doesn't know the history of the guy or doesn't know if he's going to be comfortable with that guy? Why would you ever think of hiring a person if you're not familiar with them? It just doesn't make sense. It does not make sense at all why he would go out and even bring this guy in here if he was not sure of the guy. It's one thing if you knew the guy, you worked with the guy, you had communication before, but this is something that just does not make sense. And a lot of people say, well, Larry, hold on a minute. You don't know if he made that decision to hire him or if it was David Tepper's opinion to go ahead and hire him. I do know it was Matt Rule, and I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. Number one, Matt Rule refused to go to the New York Jets as their head coach unless he was able to decide who his coaches would be. The Jets wanted to go ahead and have a say in it, and Matt Rule said, whoa, forget this. If I don't have a say in my coaches, then I do not want to coach for you. So he moved on, ended up getting the Carolina Panther job, and he decided on Joe Brady because the success Joe Brady had at LSU. Now, folks, I don't know if you know this, but Joe Brady did not call the plays at LSU. He was an offensive assistant. He assisted the offensive coordinator. So here is a guy that has not just NFL experience, but had no college experience calling plays for your Carolina Panthers. But that's all washed up now. That's all over with. There's 5 games left. And what does this mean now? Jeff Nixon will take over. He's very familiar with Matt Rule. He's worked with Matt Rule at Baylor, and they know what ticks. They know what the other guy is thinking. They know how to communicate, and they were very successful at Baylor. Now, this is not Baylor. I understand that. But when you look back and you look at the history, 2019, probably one of Baylor's most successful years. The last year Matt Rule was there. The last year Phil Snow was there, who came over from Baylor. And look what the defense has done this year under Phil Snow. That was Matt Rule's person at Baylor. Now you move the offensive coordinator into the spot, Jeff Nixon. One of the things Jeff did real well there was Jeff had a well-balanced offense. Now, remember, Chad Brewer was the quarterback. They had an excellent quarterback. But when you go back and you look statistically at each game that was played by the Baylor team usually rushed for about $125 in rushing and about 250 to 300 yards in passing. Wouldn't that be a great formula here in Carolina? Yes, it would. Now, people say, well, what's going to happen now? Is it going to be different? The only thing going to be different is that people are going to know they're serious, okay? They are out to win. They want to win, and I think they're showing that. But at the end of the day, they still have the same personnel. What is Jeff going to do different that Joe didn't do? And I want to tell you right now, I know the answer. Okay, the offense isn't necessarily going to be different. You're going to obviously have the same personnel, but he is a hell of a lot better communicator with people than Joe Brady was. And I like to see how that communication results on the field to the word execution. It's real simple in football, folks. Those folks that know football, you prepare for a game, you execute during the game, and it equals a successful result at the end. These guys got to be looking at the plays from the Tampa Bay Atlanta game this weekend, looking what Tampa Bay did and was successful at, and try to use similar plays in our playbook that went for big yardage for the Buccaneers to go ahead and do the same thing the Panthers need to do versus the Atlanta Falcons. And they will be successful. And we'll talk a lot more about the game plan coming up this Wednesday on Frankly Speaking Panthers. But basically what this means for the offense is they got a new call. You're going to see Chuba Hubbard get a lot of carries. But for those of you folks that think the passing game is going to disappear, it is not going to disappear. Jeff Nixon is going to balance it. There's a difference between balancing and eliminating. The passing game will not be eliminated. Cam Newton is going to have to make plays. And if Cam Newton has any type of first half like he did in the last game, I would not be surprised if P.J. Walker comes back in this game. Okay? We got 5 games to go. I don't want the Carolina Panther fans, even though the Panthers are in the thick of the playoffs, believe it or not, they are right smack there. You got to be thinking one game at a time. There is no game that is more important than this Sunday's game coming up at Bank of America Stadium here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta Falcons played overall pretty well versus the Buccaneers. I'm not going to say they're a team you should beat, because every time I say it's a team you should beat, what happens? We get beaten. But I am very excited to see the attitude and see how the personnel reacts and executes with Jeff Nixon at the helm. And we will go, once again, for all you Panther fans listening, we will have a lot more on this developing story Wednesday on Frankly Speaking Panthers. We'll have special guests on. We're going to try to see if we can maybe even get Jeff on with us on Frankly Speaking Panthers. No promises are being made, but we will do whatever we can to try to get this Wednesday some more details. But once again, I know you all know Joe Brady is gone, and something was going to happen. The reason why something happened there, folks, it was either Matt Rule going or Joe Brady going. And I think Matt Rule said, look, I better show these owners that I mean business, and that if I want to be here for the long run, I have to make the tough decisions. I have to make those tough decisions I necessarily weren't making a couple of weeks ago. And it came time, you had a bye week. He took some time off. He reevaluated the film, reevaluated the situation, and he realized that it was in the best interest of the Carolina Panthers to part ways with Joe Brady. And Joe Brady is gone. He'll get a job somewhere in college football, I'm sure. But at the end of the day, that's exactly what we're going to be happening. And we'll talk more about that this upcoming Wednesday. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk some Charlotte Hornets basketball. Ladies and gentlemen, the other day I'm looking around and I'm saying, I need to become part of a Carolina Panthers group that stays positive even in these tough times. And I'll tell you what, boy, have I found a group, the Carolina Panthers Den. It's on Facebook and you need to join today. This is a group that stays positive, has a good time, and interacts with a lot of other different Carolina Panthers fans. If you want to have a great time and talk about your team, encourage your team in a way that is done very professionally, then become a member of the Carolina Panthers Den on Facebook. Make sure to join today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm your host, Larry Frank. And, I don't know if anybody got to see the game last night, but what a great, great job by the Charlotte Hornets. For those of you that do not know, LaMelo Ball is out. Terry Rozier is out. Mason Plumlee is out. This team is shorthanded. 2 of his best players on the COVID list that could be out a total of 8 games. What do? Last night, they go into Atlanta shorthanded. They win 130-127. Miles Bridges, 32 points. He had 4 for 6 from three-point range, 11 of 15 from the field. What an incredible game. Kelly Oubre, 28 points, 11 of 17, 6 for 10 from three-pointers. Then you got Gordon Hayward, who did not have a great game, still went ahead, pumped in 18 points. Ish Smith, 18 points, 7 assists. Cody Martin, 19 points. DJ Washington, 13 points. This team came to play. They came to play together. They showed that they had depth. And when these other guys come back, it just goes to show you how good this team could possibly be with all this depth. The Hornets this year are 10th in the NBA, 53.5% field goals, 45.9 three-pointers, which is first in the NBA, 21 assists, which is third in the NBA, and then 6 turnovers. But the one thing I noticed about last night's game is, and I love LaMelo Ball, folks, please, do not think I'm discrediting LaMelo Ball. What a great talent. What a great future. But it seems like sometimes he loses the ball a little bit too much. He has a lot of turnovers for a guy, and I know that's going to happen with a playmaker, but when you look at last night's game, only 6 turnovers by the entire team during that game, and they ended up winning by 3. Now, right now, the game is about over at the Spectrum Center. They are playing Philadelphia tonight. And right now, Charlotte with 1:01 left just took a 119-116 lead. That's right, folks. Your Charlotte Hornets on a Kelly Oubre three-point shot, his 5th three-point shot of the night. He is 5 for 10 from three-point range. There is 1 minute and 1 second left in the game, and your Charlotte Hornets are leading by 3. We'll update you in a few minutes on that game. But I real quickly want to do a rundown before we are going to, about 10 minutes away, we're going to replay, folks, an unbelievable interview we did about 3 weeks ago, a little over 3 weeks ago, with Josh Rawitch. He is the president of the Baseball Hall of Fame. And if you did not realize, last night, the Veterans Committee inducted, I believe it was, excuse me, I believe it was 5 players. I have it. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 6 people into the Hall of Fame. And we'll go over that after the interview. But, I want to talk a little bit ACC basketball. And, the season has just started. They're about 8 games in, 9 games in. And right now, Wake Forest is leading. Believe it or not, the ACC they're in first place in basketball, but they have yet to play conference games. They haven't played a lot of people, but Wake Forest is 8-1 and 1-0 in the conference. They're averaging 81.8 points a game. They are shooting 50% from the field this year and 70% free throws. They are led by Alondes Williams, who is averaging 18.4 points a game. He is hitting 58.3% of the shots he takes. That's unbelievable. Then you got Davian Williamson, 15.2%. He's hitting 93% free throws, folks. This is incredible on Wake Forest. And then you got Jake LaRavia, 14.9 points, 55% from three-point range, 63.6% shooting. That's Wake Forest. Your Carolina basketball team, one of them. Let's continue with that. North Carolina, who I believe is probably behind Duke, the best basketball team in the state by far. They're 6-2, 1-0 in the conference. They just had a huge win the other night over Michigan. They're averaging 81.3 points per game, 49.3% field goals, 74.7 free throws, 43.3 from three-pointer. They're led by guard Caleb Love, 16.3 points. Center Armando Bucket, 15 points, 9.9 rebounds a game. R.J. Davis of the Tar Heels, 14.3 points, hitting 51.4%. Three-pointers, 90% free throws. So North Carolina, 6-1, 1-0. And for those folks wondering, when do these ACC conference games really kick off? Right about Christmas time. You know, I think they take a week off right now. Some of these teams get ready for finals, takes their finals, and then the conference competition really heats up towards the end of December. How about Duke, ranked number 3, tough loss to Ohio State. Their only blemish on their record so far. They haven't had a conference game. They're 7-1, averaging 83 points a game as well. This is a team that Coach K put together that doesn't shoot a lot of three-pointers. They're not a three-point shooting team. They like to go inside, and they like to let their forwards shoot a lot. Wendell Moore, 17.8 points a game, 6.5 rebounds, 5.6 assists. And Paolo Banchero, 17.8 points, 7.3 rebounds. And these are guys here, both forwards, leading the Duke Blue Devils. Then you got NC State, 6-2, 0-1 in the division. They lost to Louisville 73-68 in their only conference matchup. I got to give credit to Sebron. Sebron, 20.4 points a game, 10.9 rebounds. Jacole Hellens, 15.3 points. You got Casey Moselle, 12.3 points. You got Cam Hayes, 12.3 points. So the Wolfpack as well are off to a good start. Can't wait to see what conference play does for that team. And then when you move it on over, folks, you have the Clemson team. The Tigers are actually 5-4, 0-1. They actually got 5 guys shooting in double figures. 3 of them are P.J. Hall, 13.9 points, Hunter Tyson, 11.3, and Nick Garner, 11.2. But the Clemson team does not seem like they are one of those teams that really have a shooter that just stands out on this team. It's a lot of different players. And we are going to follow up a lot more on ACC basketball starting next week. But we wanted to give you a quick rundown on those teams: Wake Forest, Duke, both North Carolina and North Carolina State, and Clemson. Everybody's off to a good start. Clemson 5-4 is the weakest so far, but it just goes to tell you how good Carolina basketball really is. Let's take a quick 15-second. Let's take a commercial break. And when we come back, folks, we are going to have a recorded interview that we did about 3 weeks ago with Hall of Fame president Josh Rawitch. We'll be back right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, the other day I'm looking around and I'm saying, I need to become part of a Carolina Panthers group that stays positive even in these tough times. And I'll tell you what, boy, have I found a group, the Carolina Panthers Den. It's on Facebook and you need to join today. This is a group that stays positive, has a good time, and interacts with a lot of other different Carolina Panthers fans. If you want to have a great time and talk about your team, encourage your team in a way that is done very professionally, then become a member of the Carolina Panthers Den on Facebook. Make sure to join today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. I'm your host, Larry Frank. What a great show we have so far, and it's about to get even better as we now introduce to you the new president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. Let's welcome in Josh Rawitch. Josh, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Larry. How are you?
Buddy, I'm always doing great. First of all, I do want to thank you very, very much for joining us on Frankly Speaking Sports tonight.
It's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to. Hopefully, I'm going to try to match your energy. But you seem like a pretty energetic guy. That's going to be kind of tough at 9:30 at night.
I think you can do it.
I'm going to try.
Josh, let me ask you this. You've been in position, I guess officially, I say, for what, a couple of months now? Or not even a couple of months, I guess you can say. How are you settling in? I mean, you've been involved with baseball for, what, over 27 years? But a lot of the positions have been in administrative or executive positions. How are you settling into this new role? I call it baseball away from baseball, but it's still baseball.
Yeah, that is a good way to put it. It's been awesome. I mean, I got a very good intel from the previous two presidents who gave me a pretty good idea of what the job was like. And so I think I from my standpoint, it's been fantastic. The staff is really awesome. Many of whom have been here for 15, 20 years. They're totally dialed into what goes on here. And then some of the newer ones that everybody's just welcomed us to town. I'm here in my temporary house right now that we'll be moving out of in a couple months. But everybody in this town has welcomed me and my family, and we really just can't wait to become a part of the Cooperstown community here.
So, Josh, let me ask you this. From all your experiences, and I know you've done a lot of different jobs from public relations, player development, media communications, and PR in general, which one of those jobs have seemed to help you the most, those experiences, in this new role as president of the Hall of Fame?
It's an interesting question. I would say probably the public relations side of things certainly is the part that I think is most applicable, just because we are such a public-facing organization, and doing things even just like this, being on podcasts, and in a lot of ways being a public face for the Hall of Fame is a huge part of what this job is. So I'd say my various roles doing PR and media relations of various kinds probably has prepared me the most. But really the last decade at the Diamondbacks, I was very fortunate to work for a president who more or less kind of let me learn from everything he did. So whether it was sponsorship or broadcasting or just the way he goes about running an organization, the culture of a business. I mean, we've got 80 full-time employees here and another 20 year-round part-time employees. Anytime you're running a 100-person company, I'd say that what I learned in the last decade in Arizona really kind of prepared me for this opportunity.
Now, tell me, you've been in what we said, when you first came on, Josh, you've been in your role less than 2 months, but so far, what have you seen as the highlights of your new job, and what do you find as some of the opportunity areas in your new job?
Well, I'd say it's going to be pretty tough as a highlight to top, I guess, the first induction ceremony that I was really a part of. I was fortunate enough to come to two as a fan, but when you're sitting on the stage surrounded by all the guys whose baseball cards you collected, and you're looking out to the crowd in front of you, and it just so happens that Michael Jordan and Patrick Ewing are sitting right there with Derek Jeter's family. I don't know how you can really kind of top that as a life experience when I'm in the game of baseball. So I'd say that's been probably a highlight, just being at the World Series this past week and getting a chance to go into the clubhouse after the game and talk to several of the Braves players who gave us their artifacts to make as part of the exhibit for the museum. Those are just a couple in a couple of months. I mean, you talk about those things, it almost sounds like I'm talking about somebody else's life. It's such a crazy, cool opportunity. But in terms of opportunities, or just, I don't know, things that I'm looking most forward to, I'm still kind of learning exactly how we operate here. But I think the biggest thing that we've talked a lot about, and I talked about it through my interview process with Jane Forbes Clark, who was ultimately the chairman of the board that put me in this position, it's just finding ways to stay relevant for the next generation of baseball fans. Because you and I grew up loving it, and we could walk around the Hall of Fame right now and see it through our eyes. But when I go with my son or with my daughter or with anybody who's of the generation behind me, I want to make sure that they're still experiencing it and having all the same amazing feelings that I had the first time I walked through it. And so how exactly that manifests itself in the next few years and decades ahead, I guess we'll see. But I see that as the biggest opportunity for us.
Josh, talk about the process now. And I don't think people realize, you being president of the Hall of Fame doesn't mean you have all the say necessarily in who becomes members of the Hall of Fame. But what do you think of, we could sit here and debate all day long about the current process of how people get inducted into the Hall of Fame. But right now, I know it's a bunch of baseball writers that decide on, who gets inducted. Is it true for all the fans out there that don't know much about it? The president doesn't have a vote on who goes in, do they?
I don't know. And it's funny because I don't think a lot of people, when I took this job, I got all my friends, people I've known since I was a kid, telling me, you got to get Pete Rose in there. You got to get this guy. And I had to point out that, no, I do not have any say in that. But ultimately, what we see ourselves as caretakers of the game. So we do set up the process that dating back to literally the very first days of the Hall of Fame in the mid-1930s, the baseball writers have been involved in the voting process since that very early, literally the very first class. And then very shortly thereafter, what was then the Veterans Committees and now known as the Era Committees, those came along to make sure that if the baseball writers somehow missed the mark somewhere along the way, that there were other ways for people to look at how you might get in. And so ultimately my job is to make sure, along with several other people in the office, to make sure that we put the process in place, that it gets implemented, but we do not get a vote. I will be in the room when the Era Committee debates all of these names that just got announced this past week, but I won't be weighing in. I won't be giving my opinions on the names of those guys. We're just ultimately there to make sure that the process is carried out fairly, that it's confidential, because you obviously want that room to feel comfortable that what they say in that room isn't going to leave that room. And so that's really what we do. And then once people are elected to the Hall of Fame, it's our job to make sure that we honor them. We create the plaques, we create the whole ceremony, the induction weekend. All those things fall to the responsibility of the staff.
So let me ask you this, and I don't know if this is a question for you or if it would be a question for the baseball writers, but I'm sure you'll answer it accordingly. It was back in, I want to say, 2006. And I know you had the opportunity before you became president on your trip up to Cooperstown to go to the Negro League Baseball Museum. I had a chance for the first time 2 years ago to go. It was just one of the best places, right up there with the Baseball Hall of Fame that I ever been to. It was just incredible amount of knowledge, as I know you will agree, and it was just incredible. But even when you go in there, they'll tell you it's a museum. It's not a Hall of Fame. It's to give you the history on the Negro Leagues and what it was all about. In 2006, the Baseball Hall of Fame inducted 17 Negro players, such great players. I think Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Monty Irvin, Buck Leonard, I think, was in there. Just a number, as you know. And then Robert Manfred just recently bestowed the Major League, announced that 2,400 Negro League players, Black and Hispanic, without giving Major League Baseball credit, as they were Major League Baseball players. My question to you is, what happened after 2006? It seems like since 2006, the and I know you haven't been there, but the Baseball Hall of Fame hasn't really recognized any more of the Negroid players. Is that something that is Baseball Hall of Fame related or Baseball Writers Association?
So a couple things there. One, I mean, that group that went in 2006 was certainly the largest group, but believe it or not, there were actually quite a number of Negro Leagues players who were inducted prior to that for 30 years now. Maybe not the same numbers that happened in that big election in 2006, but Negro Leaguers like Satchel Paige and others had been in previously. And then in 2006, what happened? MLB, right around the turn of the century, commissioned a study. They paid significant amounts of money. I think it was a couple $100,000, I believe, to basically study the Negro Leagues and figure out, hey, is there anything we're missing here? And that led to the 2006 vote that put in 17 players. At that time, what was said, it was basically, okay, we've now studied, we've seen who belongs in there from the group of Negro Leaguers, who belongs in the Plaque Gallery. Unless we get more information, we are not going to keep looking at this every 2 to 3 years. They felt like at the time, we've corrected the wrongs that existed, and 17 players on top of the other, I think it was 14 others. I think there's well into the 30s of Negro leaguers who have been inducted over the years. They felt like unless there was additional information, there wasn't a need to really go back and study it again. And what's happened probably in the last 15 years, really thanks to a number of incredible historians, but probably none more so than the Seamheads database that went and basically did for the Negro leagues what Retro Sheet and Baseball Reference and these other websites that logged statistics. They went and found incredible amounts of data that I think really helped people put a lot of these statistics into perspective. And so when MLB, for that reason, that was one of the reasons we felt like there's more information, so it's time to probably look again. And then, like you said earlier this year, MLB recognized the Negro leagues. And many people think the Negro leagues were like the major leagues. I mean, they really weren't. They were a collection of different leagues all throughout various parts of the country that they weren't one giant league that was called the Negro leagues. They were a series of leagues that ultimately were deemed to be on par with Major League Baseball, the level of talent that was being played in MLB. And so when Major League Baseball kind of made that announcement, we ultimately decided it was time to look again. And when we had numerous different committees look into who belongs on the ballot, it was the first time ever that our early baseball ballot is anybody pre-1950. So that includes people who are in the Negro leagues, people who were not in the Negro leagues, and people who even predated the Negro leagues, because there were actually integrated baseball back in the 1800s that people don't really talk about. So anyway, anybody pre-1950 was eligible to be on this ballot, and a series of historians put together 10 names that are going to be considered again in December at the winter meetings for potential induction into the Hall of Fame.
So you mentioned this a little bit earlier, Josh, in the telecast, but we are talking to, by the way, Josh Rawich, the president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. Besides your friends that, I've called you, how many times when you're walking around that Baseball Hall of Fame do actual guests say to you, hey, what do you think about this one or that one not being in the Hall of Fame? I mean, you have to get questions about that all the time. And like you said, you can't really say your opinion because ethically, It's probably not the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully at this point, well, I wouldn't say thankfully, but I'm not that recognizable just yet that I'm walking around the museum and people are stopping me. But I will say that one of the best things about this particular Hall of Fame that I would say does not seem to be the case of maybe the other Halls of Fames, it's just the level of debate that goes into that. And I remember the podcast you did a while back that I listened to where you talked about the 10 guys you felt like belonged in there. And you're obviously not alone in your thinking on a number of people there that fans love to debate who belongs in there. And so while I don't personally get that many questions yet, I understand why the questions exist. I understand why people have really, really strong opinions that how could it possibly be that this person isn't in there? And someone on the other side of the coin feels just as adamant, like there's no way this person's ever going to get in the Hall of Fame, or they ruin the Hall of Fame. That is, I think, what makes this place really unique, is that there's so much talk around who belongs in the Plaque Gallery and who doesn't. But I should also specify, and this is actually particularly relevant, just in light of ESPN's recent documentary on Barry Bonds, all the people that people question about, whether it's Thurman Munson, Pete Rose, Barry Bonds, or anybody in between, they're all in the museum. They're all documented for the sake of history. In most cases, we have artifacts from almost every one of these people, and they're documented. When people talk about the Hall of Fame, obviously they're talking about the Plaque Gallery and having a plaque on the wall, and that's obviously a different level of enshrinement.
Now, once again, I know you can't say, and I'm not going to ask you it, but I know Pete Rose names, Gil Hodges is another one that comes up, which they're having a committee, one of the New Era committees. I know votes on that soon. I think that's happening. But my question to you is, with the Pete Rose thing, forget about Pete Rose. I know we all have our opinions, but is it the base? Once again, I'm asking you so the fans understand this. When you talk about the integrity of the game, is that a rule from the Baseball Hall of Fame, or is that a written rule from Major League Baseball?
So it's kind of two different questions you're asking. So we do have, as part of what we give the baseball writers when they're voting on who belongs in the Hall of Fame, is what people often refer to now as kind of the integrity clause, or it's sportsmanship and character, the character clause. All of that is a very important part of what baseball writers take into account when they vote for someone to go into the Hall of Fame. But Major League Baseball would need to put, in the case of, say, Shoeless Joe Jackson or Pete Rose, they are not currently eligible to even be voted on. So
right.
It's hard to, depending on your question, it's not like the writers had a chance to vote in these people. They were not eligible according to the rules of Major League Baseball. To be eligible to be voted on for the Hall of Fame, you have to be in good standing with Major League Baseball. And in these cases, they're not. But in other cases, there have been people who have been eligible that the baseball writers may decide don't meet the level of character, ethics, or integrity that they feel. And ultimately, you don't need 100% to get in. You need 75%, which is a very high standard. But ultimately, 75% is what has been pretty much going back the 82 years, the percentage required to get into the Hall of Fame. And we think that's the right amount, 3/4 of the electorate.
And you and I both know there's always going to be some players that don't make it, where some people are going to say should make it, other people are going to say other people should make it. But the question I was getting at, Josh, and not to push or anything, but is it so it's not what impact you had on the field then, it's the impact overall on what you had? Because no matter who you say, nobody can argue. You and I can't sit here and argue Pete Rose didn't have a positive impact on the field of baseball, the greatest hitter or arguably of our time. We know it. So now it is more than what's just done about playing the game of baseball.
Correct. And unfortunately, I wish I had in front of me the exact verbiage, but if you go to our website, you can see it. It clearly, to be considered to get into the Hall of Fame, what you have to have done on the field has to be really among the top 1% who have ever done it. But then ultimately, on top of that, the writers are told that they can't take into consideration the integrity, sportsmanship, and character of the people who they're voting on. And so in that instance, we don't define that for them. We don't tell them how to define character. We don't tell them how to define sportsmanship. It's really on each independent voter. And that's in a lot of ways why the system works, because the voters do get to decide that on their own. If we were telling them what that meant, then we might as well just decide ourselves who's going in there.
Correct.
Ultimately, we entrust that group who has been watching baseball for generations and writing about baseball and chronicling the history. We entrust them to vote the way that they see fit. And if 3 out of every 4 of them believe you belong in, that's a pretty good threshold.
Absolutely. We're talking to Josh Rodwich, president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame. Josh, I want to get into a couple more things and then we'll let you run. Talk about, I always wondered this, when you run the ceremonies at the beginning of the summer or during the middle of summer, whatever it is, June-ish or whatever, when you run the ceremonies, do you, and it might sound like a weird question, but let's say like the last one, I believe it was Jeter and Walker, I think Marvin Freeman, just to name a few that I remember off the top of my head. When they were inducted, do you move things around in the Baseball Hall of Fame knowing that you're going to get a bunch of Yankee fans, or in Larry Walker's case, he was an Expo and a Rocky? Do you move things around because now you know you're going to have a lot of Yankee fans, a lot of Expo fans, and so on during that time so that people could see those things?
That's a great question. I wouldn't say we move it around. There's a few things we will do. Obviously, we do have a store there, and so we will make sure that we're stocked properly with Rockies gear or Cardinals gear for Ted Simmons or Yankees gear. So certainly that piece of the business has to pay attention to who's going in. And then there are certain portions of the museum. There are 2 specific areas. One right before you go into the Plaque Gallery that is actually focused on the current inductees, the very next group of inductees, where you'll be able to watch a video about them. And there's a spot where you can take kind of a picture in the wall where they're, it's hard to explain, but an alcove right before you walk into the Plaque Gallery. And then there is upstairs on the 3rd level a specific area geared towards each one of these guys that's like a locker of their items. It's a display of items of Jeters, of Walkers, of Ted Simmons. But we don't know. We don't go through the museum and say, okay, there's going to be a lot of Yankee fans this year. Let's load up on Yankee stuff. Really, what we're trying to do is tell the story of all 30 teams all throughout the museum. And there's no shortage of Yankee stories. And the other thing that I'd say that we've added, and we launched this during or right before the pandemic. So unfortunately, it didn't get nearly as much attention as it probably should. But when you come and visit, one of the things that happens when you walk in the front door, you get your ticket and they'll ask you, where are you from? Who's your favorite team? So you may say, okay, I'm a Reds fan. I came here from Cincinnati. We have this program called the Starting Nine, and they will hand you a sheet of paper that's basically a scavenger hunt of 9 items that are kind of representative of the Reds. And it's not like the 9 best items. It's 9 really unique items that some may go back to the 1800s. Some might be from last year with Joey Votto, but you can walk around the museum and have it tailored to your experience. So all 30 teams can do that. And then on top of that, if you happen to have an inductee from your team going in, there are sections focused on that particular person. But we didn't like load up on Rocky stuff this year or load up on Expos. Because ultimately we want to tell the story of all 30 teams throughout the museum.
Makes sense. Now, the customer's experience. I know they say you spend an average of 3 hours in there, but everybody that I talk to says, first of all, it's so cost effective. It doesn't cost a lot to get into I think they said like $25 on average. And they say, Larry, forget 3 hours. You could spend a whole day. Some even say they would like to go back because there's still stuff they could not see. The fan experience, from what everyone says, is top notch at the Baseball Museum.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the first time I came with my father, I think back in 2001, we really only spent 4 hours or so there, and we didn't even scratch the surface. I mean, it is impossible to get anywhere near. Forget even everything upstairs. We have 40,000 artifacts throughout the building, many of which are downstairs in the archives. But you really, frankly, need an entire weekend of going through. If you want to do it at a pace where you're really taking stuff in, if you want to just kind of fly through and catch the highlights, sure, you can do that in 3 to 4 hours. But if you're a true baseball fan, honestly, I really would come for a long weekend and plan on spending several days making your way through the various exhibits. Because if you're going to stop and read some of the stuff that's there, you want to actually understand the history going back to the mid-1800s, or you want to use some of the touchscreen stuff that we have that allows you to really explore records or watch videos or walk through the Plaque Gallery. And let's say you're a Phillies fan, just stopping to read the plaques of all the Phillies in the Hall of Fame could take you 2 hours. I mean, it's an incredible experience. And on top of that, Cooperstown as a village, it's magical. I mean, we're right on a lake where you can take a boat out and go on the lake. We've got amazing restaurants. We've got other museums all within town. We're literally right around the corner from our Hall of Fame or 2 other world-class museums. You really could spend a long weekend to a full week here and not run out of stuff. So I know I sound a little bit Chamber of Commerce when I say that, but I mean, the reality is every single day I have an alert go off on my calendar at 3 o'clock, and I walk into the museum for 10 minutes and I go look at some case, either somebody's plaque, maybe who I don't know anything about, or an artifact or a handful of artifacts that I want to learn about. And I will probably be doing that for the next several years if I really want to take it in entirely. And so to come in and try to get it all done in 3 hours is really hard. At the bare minimum, I'd say lock in a full day, and really, frankly, a weekend is the best way to do it.
Last 2 questions, and they're going to be on the fan experience. What's the one thing, Josh, that you see where fans go in and the one thing they are so amazed of when they come out of it, they say, that was incredible, that one particular thing? What has been the one, well, and I'm sure there's many things, but what is the one highlight that you hear the most out of people that are visiting the Baseball Hall of Fame?
Man, what's so hard is that it is different for everybody because it depends on where you came from. So, I mean, to answer your question, but then I'm going to cheat a little bit, I would say we purposely have people go upstairs first. They watch the film, it's about an 18-minute movie that literally moved me to tears. I mean, it is so good. It really is. It's this incredible movie. we had made about 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago, that just, if you're a baseball fan, it's gonna bring you to tears. It's that good. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that. And then you continue through the museum on the second floor, the third floor, and we purposely have you finish at the Plaque Gallery, because that is kind of when people think of a Hall of Fame, you walk into that sacred Plaque Gallery and you see people's eyes light up, and it's really pretty special. But so to cheat, I mean, those are the things I'd say, the film and the actual Plaque Gallery. But to cheat a little bit, I mean, honestly, what we hear the most is conversations between generations of families where a grandparent, a parent, and a kid are all walking around together, and the grandparent's pointing at this thing. I remember when I saw Willie Mays, and the parent might be saying, yeah, but I remember when I saw Will Clark, and the kid might be saying, I saw Buster Posey. And it happens no matter what city you grew up in. They're all over the museum. So that's what I think. You see people leave here, and they're just blown away by how it connects them to the past generations. It's really pretty special.
So and the closing question, what is, as president of the Hall of Fame, what's the one goal for you to have every person that comes in there have from an experience? I know it's all different, but I never heard anyone, there's certain things you'll hear, like a restaurant review, where there's going to be some bad reviews. I have never heard, and I've talked to a lot of people, a bad review about the Baseball Hall of Fame. It's something every baseball fan, like you says, dreams of going to see. But what about the experience do you want people leaving thinking in their head when they leave?
Well, it's really honestly what I just said. I want them to leave there connected to their past generations. And whether that means their parents or their kids or their future kids. Maybe you don't have kids yet. You're 22 years old, but you're thinking about, my grandparents used to. I want them leaving there thinking, I got to come back to this place, because it reminded me why I love baseball so much. It connected the generations of my family in a way that not a lot of things in American history can do. And I think it's really, for us, it's connecting generations, it's honoring excellence, and it's preserving history. We want people to walk around. Most people don't realize we're a nonprofit organization. We make money off of donations. So we want people to think, that's pretty cool that this incredible document that was between the Yankees and the Red Sox that sold Babe Ruth 100 plus years ago is preserved here in temperature controlled circumstances, so that it's there for 100 years from now. When my grandkids want to come and see the same document, they'll be able to see these things. That's what I want people to leave, is to have that same unbelievable experience that my dad had the first time he came, that I had, that my kids had. We just want people to leave here feel like you said, going home and telling everybody, I know Cooperstown isn't the easiest place in the world to get to, but find a way to get there, because you won't regret it.
Josh, for the fans that are listening, do the hours of operation change now as it goes into the wintertime? What are the hours of operation? So, because we get people from all over the United States listening, what is your hours switching to?
So prior to COVID, we used to stay open much later. We've now been closing still around 5 o'clock. So that won't change. We'll be open till 5 o'clock every day. We're open every day of the year other than Christmas, New Year's, and Thanksgiving. So there's only 3 days that we close up. And honestly, for people who are thinking about coming, wintertime is oddly enough a great time to come, because you almost have the museum to yourself. It's not like when you come in summertime and there's hundreds, if not more than 1,000 people on a given day wandering around the museum. If you get here in the winter, you can have your run of the place, and you'll really appreciate it in a different way. So hopefully people will become members of the organization and come back as often as possible. Take your time, make it a family trip, or come on your own and do it at your own pace. It's open pretty much all day throughout the winter time. So hopefully we'll see people out here. And if you come and let me know that you heard me talking on your podcast here, Larry, we'll find a way to give them a little something special when they get here. All they got to do is let the front desk know that they were listening to Larry Frank's podcast, or the Frankly Talking Sports, and we'll get them a little something special. I'll come out and give them something.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, as always, I appreciate you taking time. I know you're a busy man, out of your busy schedule, and best of luck to you in your new role.
Awesome. Thank you, Larry. Have a great one.
All right, you too. Stay safe. All right, that was Josh Rodwich, president of the National Baseball Hall of Fame and Museum. Hopefully that answered a lot of your questions. I know a lot of baseball. We're going to go ahead, take a quick 15-second break, and when we come back, we're going to talk real quickly about the Veterans Committee and the inductees into the Hall of Fame last night. We'll be back right after this. You are watching Frankly Speaking Sports, live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports. We got about 4 or 5 minutes left in the show, and real quickly, for those of you that did not know, the Veterans Committee last night voted in 6 more people who originally did not make the Hall of Fame when they were on their original ballots, were voted in yesterday. And we want to go over those 6 people that did real quickly for you. Starts out with Gil Hodges. Gil Hodges, Met fans have been dying for Gil Hodges to get in the Hall of Fame. Well, your prayers have been answered. The manager of the 1969 New York Mets that won the championship, the amazing Mets, is now or will be 2022 inducted into the Hall of Fame. Gil is an 8-time All-Star, 3-time World Series champ, 3-time Gold Glove. He hit 4 home runs in 1 game. His number 14 with the New York Mets is retired. He is also in the New York Mets Hall of Fame. He had an 18-year career with the Brooklyn and LA Dodgers, 2 years with the New York Mets. He also was a manager for the Washington Senators and the New York Mets. He batted .273, 370 homers, 1,274 RBIs for Gil Hodges. His career as a manager was 650 and 753. But once again, he did win a World Series as a New York Mets. So congratulations to Gil Hodges. Then another guy who definitely deserved to do it, still alive, and I'm so happy he's alive to see this. Jim Katt, the left-handed pitcher who had a 25-year career as a left-handed pitcher in Major League Baseball. Played for the Washington Senators / Minnesota Twins, Chicago White Sox, Phillies, Yankees, and Cardinals. He was .283 and .237 with a 3.45 ERA, had 2,461 Ks. 3-time All-Star, 1982 World Series champ, 16-time Gold Glove winner as a pitcher, led the AL in wins in 1966, and he is a member of the Minnesota Twins Hall of Fame as well. So we do definitely want to go ahead and welcome him as well. Then we talked. You heard that interview with Josh Rodwich, and we were talking about Negro League players getting into the Hall of Fame and why it seemed like there was a little lull. Well, there was no lull yesterday. Let's welcome in Minnie Mimosa, the Cuban Comet, as he was nicknamed. He began his career in the Negro Leagues, 2-time Negro League All-Star, 9-time All-Star, went to the Negro League World Series in 1947, 3-time Gold Glove, 3-time American League stolen base leader, and his number 9 is retired with the Chicago White Sox, Minnie Mimosa. Then, how about one of my favorite Minnesota Twins players of all time? He was a right fielder, became a designated hitter, also was a coach, I believe, Tony Oliva. And I'll tell you what, Tony Oliva batted .304, 220 homers, 947 RBIs. But listen to this, guys. He was an 8-time All-Star, 2-time World Series champ, AL Rookie of the Year in 1964, Gold Glove Award in 1966, 3-time AL batting champ. Minnesota Twins retired his number 6, and he's in the Minnesota Twins Hall of Fame. Tony Oliva, just an unbelievable player, well-deserved. Then it's about time, and I'll say it again, it's about time. My good buddy Bob Hendricks, who's the president of the Negro League Hall of Fame, has to be one happy man today. Buck O'Neil is in the Hall of Fame. And it's not just what he did on the field, it's what he did for the Negro Leagues off the field, too. I mean, he was a major role in establishing the Negro League Baseball Museum in Kansas City, Missouri. I've been there. It is incredible, incredible. Folks, if you are a baseball fan and do not get to see this amazing museum, you are doing yourself a bit dissatisfaction. It is unbelievable. Buck O'Neil was a first baseman and manager in the Negro Leagues, first African-American coach in Major League Baseball, 2-time All-Star and Negro League World Series champ. He batted .288 between 1937 and 1950. He had 4 300-plus seasons. He won 2 league titles as manager. He was a great hitter. I think he batted .353 in 1946, bounced back and batted .350 in 1947, played in 3 East-West All-Star games and 2 Negro League World Series. Well overdue. Congratulations, Buck O'Neil. And then somebody I did not know much about, but well-deserving, was Bud Fowler, who played baseball. I wasn't around and none of you were around, 1895 to 1898. Earliest known African-American player in organized professional baseball. That says something right there. Baseball player, manager, and a club organizer. Fowler played 10 seasons of organized baseball, a record for an African-American player, until it was broken by Jackie Robinson in his last season with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Ladies and gentlemen, those are your 6 inductees by the Veteran Committee into the Hall of Fame right now in no specific order: Gil Hodges, Jim Catt, Minnie Mimosa, Tony Oliva, Buck O'Neil, and Bud Fowler. Just amazing and so well-deserved. I am so happy to see these guys go in. Ladies and gentlemen, for all of you that have joined in tonight, and I know we've had a number of my good buddies from the Carolina Panthers Den. I want to thank everybody, every Carolina Panther group that is listening and participating tonight. Reminder that we will be back tomorrow night, College Football Tuesday. Incredible, incredible show with Zach McKinnell, my co-host. We will talk about the games this weekend, the 4 teams that are making playoffs, and what you should expect going further. It is the finale of our College Football Tuesday show, so you definitely want to tune in and join us. And then Wednesday night, for all you Panther fans, you want to know what's going to happen with the Panthers this weekend. We're going to preview the game that's going to happen here in Charlotte, North Carolina at Bank of America Stadium. We will have that Wednesday on Frankly Speaking Panther, beginning at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. For all of us here at Frankly Speaking Sports, we thank you very much for listening, and have a safe and good evening.